Hello guys, welcome to your 27th lesson in this VueJS course. In this lesson, I'm really very much excited because we are going to be looking at state management with VueX. So, what exactly is VueX? Now, VueX is a state management pattern or library for VueJS applications. Think of VueX as something such as Redux, the way we have Redux for maybe any other application or any other framework such as maybe Vue or React, etc. Now, it is a centralized store for all components. So Vuex essentially acts as a central store for all of your component data where you can basically just retrieve from any component whenever necessary. Okay, it also provides rules on how the state can be accessed or can be changed or mutated. So the Vuex actually handles all of these things for us. Now let's take a bit of an example. Let's say we have an app like this and we have the root components right here, and inside of this root components, we have the home. Okay, we have the blog, we have the navbar, and then we have the profile right here. Now inside of the home we have the welcome widgets, while inside of the blog we have the blog details, and inside of the blog details we have the comment section. And similar thing we have with the navbar, we have the links inside of the navbar, and inside of the links we have our avatar. Now let's say we actually need to share data from the app to the welcome widget or to the comment section or the avatar or the profile. Let's say whenever a user logs in, we actually want these details, some details, to get rendered conditionally. So when the user is logging on the welcome widget, we want to actually display their name. On the comment section, we want to show their name and maybe the profile picture. Similar thing we want on the avatar, and also on the profile components we want to show their detail. Now one thing we have to do is actually find a way to pass this data from this particular app to the blog, and then from the blog to the blog details, and the blog details to the comment section. So we are going to find a way to actually dribble it down, all right, which could work in some cases. But what if there's actually a better way to handle this? Okay, instead of we passing it from our app to all this component that needs to actually have this particular state, this particular data, what we have a VueX store. Now the VueX actually would help us in such a way that every component that needs access to a particular data in the store could just connect straight to the VueX store without we having to pass component data across or pass props across. So each of the components can individually tap into the VueX store and take in the data or the state that they actually need. Now let's actually see how that applies to our recipe app. Okay, let's take a quick look at our app, and the section I want to come to is the recipe of the moment. Okay, we have this component here and we have fresh sardines. Okay, if I should maybe go to the about page and I come back here and we come down, we'll see that it's going to actually change. Now we don't want that. We want whenever an API call has been made, we want that API, that details, to still remain inside of this component, and that is one of the ways we are going to be implementing VueX. Now unlike the example I gave earlier, we don't have user logging into this particular app, so we don't need to share user details, but this is one detail that we need to share across this component, so that whenever we make a request to the API, it gets saved, and whenever the component loads again, it doesn't automatically make that request and change the detail that we actually have in or inside of this component, the recipe details. Now let's go over to the VueX documentation. Now one thing I would like to note is the new default state management library is Pinia, but it's very similar to VueX. If you are actually able to learn VueX, the chances are you're already in a good position to start using Pinia. Okay, but we're going to be focusing on VueX for now, and maybe in a later series I'm going to make a fresh course on Pinia. All right, so let's go. You can go over this. Okay, what is state management pattern, but I think I've pretty much explained everything. So let's go to the installation process. To do that, we can use npm install VueX at next. So I'm just going to copy that and I'm going to come right here and let's just paste this here and install it. Okay, so that is done. And the before we actually go into our code, there are some things that I would like to introduce you to on VueX. Now, the first is we have the state. Okay, now inside of our VueX store, we can create the state, a particular state. Okay, so we have the state right here. So that's the first thing. The state just basically represents data, reactive data that okay we want to make use of inside of our components, inside of our app. Okay, the next thing we have are getters. So getters is they are basically computed value. Just think of getters as computed values for the VueX store. Okay, and then we have mutations. Okay, now one thing is if you look here, it says that the only way to actually change state in a VueX store is by committing a mutation. So mutation is basically telling VueX that we need this particular state to actually change. And the last one is actions. Now the two major differences between actions and mutations is that action commits mutation. Okay, let's take a quick look at this particular example. We have a mutation here to actually increase this state, the state we've created here, this count. And then you can create an action. The action is going to actually commit that particular mutation. If we look at here, we see context.commit increment. This will automatically run this particular mutation, which in turns changes this particular state. And another thing about action is action can contain asynchronous operations. You can connect to API, do a whole lot of things making use of actions. All right, so let's look at how to set up our VueX store. All right, I'm right here inside of our app, and the first thing I want to show you is I created a new index.js which contains all the category data that we actually need, and this data I'm going to make use of it inside of our store. And how did I get this? By making use of this category, calling these categories endpoint. It gives us all the available categories and their description, their ID. This makes it easier for the app to actually have some predefined data, especially when we are calling categories etc. Okay, so I have this set up right here. Now, and what I want to do is I want to create a new folder. Let me increase the font size so to make this easier. Okay, so right here I'm going to create a new folder and I'm going to say store. And inside of this, I'm going to have index.js. All right. Now, the first thing we actually need to do is we have to import something, which is we are going to import create store. Okay, from VueX. Okay, that's the first thing we need to do. And then we are going to export default. Now, one way to do this, I can just create a variable. I can say const store equals to create store, and inside of this we are going to have an object. Okay, now this object is going to have, first we are going to have the state. So the state we actually want to have, so we have the state right here. Okay, and then the next we have getters. Okay, and after that we can have our mutations. Okay, and then the last thing is we can have our actions. All right, so we have these four things right here which we need. I can decide to say export default. Okay, stop. This works fine, but I think I'm just going to export write my code this way. So I'm going to say export default. Yeah, this also works fine. All right, so we have various states we actually want to create. Now, the first state is the recipe of the day. Okay, so recipe of the day, and from the onset I'm going to declare it as null. And then the next thing is we are going to have categories, and that's going to be an empty array, and I want to have selected category. Okay, and that is going to be null at the moment. And also I'm going to have featured recipes, so we won't have to fetch that again. Featured recipes, okay, and then the last is going to be current recipe list. Okay, now remember we already have this data from this our data folder right here, so all I just have to do is do something such as import. So I want to import something from data. Okay, so I'm going to say import category data. All right, and now these our categories is going to be equal to the category data. Okay, so whenever we have the state, this automatically would initialize, the store will automatically initialize the store the state as having all this data we have right here. And for the selected category, whenever the app loads, we want to have a default category selected. So I'm just going to pick a random data inside of this particular array, a random category. So that's what I'm going to do. So to do that, what I'm going to essentially do is I'm going to say category data, and inside of that we're going to have math.random, and then that's going to be multiplied by category data dot length. Okay, so I'm going to wrap all of that with math.floor to make sure it's going to be a whole number. All right, so we have this set up right here. Now let's save that and let's come to our main.js file. And the first thing I actually want to do is I want to import the store, import store from store. Okay, and then what we're going to do is right here I'm going to say .use store. So let's save that and let's come to our browser. So let's see if that refreshes. Okay, that refreshes and load, no error here. So how exactly do we access our store and our state inside of our component? Now that is very much simple. Right here, let me open a particular component. Let's say for example the home hero component, and what I'm going to do is, remember we're making use of the composition API, and right here I'm going to import something. I'm going to say import use store, then from VueX. Okay, and then what I'm going to do say is const store is going to be equal to use store, and then what we're going to do next is I'm just going to console.log store. All right, let's save that and let's see what we have inside of our browser. Okay, let me dock it to the bottom. And if we should bring this over a bit, we can see we have a bunch of details, and right here we see states. Okay, let's just console.log the state that we have. Okay, so I'm going to say store.state, and let's save that and let's see what we have. Alright, so we can see we have the state right here, and inside of the targets right here we can see we have the categories, we have the current recipes, we have the featured categories, and we have the recipe of the day and also selected category. So we can see our state right here. So any component can automatically access the VueX store. So if I should come to maybe the about hero for example, all I just have to do is have a similar syntax. I can just copy this and paste this right here. Okay, this is still making use of the options API, so I'm just going to use setup, and I can save that and I can come right here. Let me clear the console, and inside of the about section we can automatically see our store right here. So that means I can automatically make use of the store here. So instead of having fruits salad written, or instead of having food mood written here, or yeah, I can basically just come right here. Okay, clear everything that we have here, and I can say store.state, and maybe let's see inside of our store what other thing do we have. Categories. So let's try accessing that, and then let's save automatically we can see it being imputed to the browser. So we have all of our details right here. So that is one way we can actually make things easier inside of our app and making use of VueX. All right, so let's actually make use of this inside of our components inside of the app where we actually need them. So the first thing is I'm going to come to this component home food of the day, okay, or recipe of the day, and right here we see that what we did was automatically whenever the app loads, it gets the recipe of the moment. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to import create store use store from VueX, and we're going to initialize the store by saying const store equals to use store. Okay, so we have this done right here. The next thing I actually want to do is I want to check if this recipe of the day right here is null or not. And the way to do that is I can say if store dot state dot recipe of the day is equal to null, then what we're going to do is console.log and then recipe of the day is null. Now, if not, what we essentially want to do is console.log. Now, recipe of the day as data. Now, let's save that and let's go into our component right here. So, right here, let me refresh this. And then we can see right here it says that the recipe of the day is null. Now we essentially want to make it this way. Here's how our app is going to work. Now whenever this particular app loads and the state load, by default is going to be null. Now it's going to check if this is actually null. Now if it is null, it's going to fetch connect to the API, run this particular function. Now instead of we actually saving the value inside of a local state here or inside of a local variable here, what we want is to actually commute a particular mutation, mutate this value and replace this recipe of the day with the new data that we get. Okay, so this data we get right here, we actually want to, instead of assigning it to the recipe of the moment that we created here, we actually want to dispatch it and to actually replace the state. So whenever this component loads, as long as the app still hasn't been refreshed, hasn't been reloaded rather, so the state still remains the same. Okay, so let's actually find a way to do that, but first we have to do something. We have to create a mutation, and that is really simple actually. So essentially what I do is I'm going to create a function, okay, and the name of the function is going to be set recipe of the day. All right, and that is going to actually take in two parameters. Okay, now the first parameter is going to be the state, okay, the state that we actually have here, and then the second parameter is going to be the whatever it is we want to pass into it, which is going to be the recipe. Okay, and now inside of this particular function I'm just going to say state dot recipe of the day is going to be equal to recipe. Now that is really simple, isn't it? All right, so we are going to save that, and right here what we're going to do is, now if recipe state the recipe of the day equals to null, then it should actually and it should fetch this data. Okay, so that's essentially what I'm going to do, and whenever we get to this particular point right here, now instead of saying recipe.moment.value equals to this, we're actually going to dispatch or actually commit a mutation. And how do we do that? So instead of we assigning this right here, what I'm essentially going to say is store dot commit. Okay, so we commit mutations, and what mutation do I want to commit exactly? Okay, we have this particular function here, so I'm just going to copy it and I'm going to say, okay, we want to commit this particular mutation. And are we taking in any particular parameter, any value? Yes, and the value we are taking is the value we get back from the API. So I'm just going to copy this and I'm going to paste this here. So now let's save that and let's run it. Okay, So right here we have the recipe of the day. Okay, now automatically the function right here is still working, but the reason we are not seeing anything right here is because I made a kind of a mistake. If you look inside of our app right here, we are still trying to access the data from this particular variable. Okay, so I'm just going to do something such as remove this particular variable right here, and what we're going to do is replace this recipe of the moment. Okay, wherever we see the recipe of the moment, I'm going to change it to store.state. Okay, and the name of the state is recipe of the day. So that's essentially what we're going to do. So I'm going to replace it here, replace it here, replace it here, do that, do that, do that here. Okay, and that covers everything. So now let's save that and let's see what we have. Okay, now we can see we have this BlackBerry 4 right here. Now how about we go into another component or another page where we still have the same component. All right, so we come into the recipe right here, and we should still see the BlackBerry 4 right here. So it does not unnecessarily connect to the API, and if we look here, it logs to the console that recipe of the day already has data. So we can see how the component is making use of this. So I can just essentially clear this off. All right, so this makes things easier. Now only until when I actually refresh this, okay, before this actually loads, and we can see where we have this particular recipe, and even if the component gets unmounted and we move into another particular page and get mounted, we see we still have the same data being preserved inside of our app. And this is one of the advantages of VueX. Now I'm going to speed up, and we're going to make use of VueX in other components also, such as the featured recipe. We don't want to make use of static data, and such as whenever we are fetching a particular recipe, we are loading a recipe here. So the goal is to make sure that whenever we click on a particular recipe, okay, whenever we click on a particular recipe, it loads a particular category. So when I click on chicken, it loads the category. And also note that we have a default category selected here, the selected category. Now that's going to be the default category is going to load the recipe from, but whenever we come here, we can decide to change the selected or the default category. All right, so the first thing I want to do is come back right here and the featured recipe category. Now I'm going to create a mutation that is going to change this featured recipe category, and to do that is also very simple. All we have to do is create a mutation, a function inside of this mutation, and that is going to undo that. Okay, so I can just duplicate this. Okay, let's do that. Let's duplicate this, and instead of set recipe of the day, what I want to do, name is set featured recipes. And right here, what we want to essentially do is, okay, there should be a comma here actually. Okay, what we essentially want to do is we want to say state dot featured recipes is going to be recipes, and this right here also, this is going to be recipes. All right, that solves that problem. So let's create the remaining mutations that we actually are going to need or make use of. All right, so I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to say set current recipes. List. Okay, so let's add a comma here, and then also we want the current recipes list to be equals to recipes. And I think the last thing we actually need to do is we have to set the selected category also. All right, so we are going to also, let me just copy this and put it right here at the beginning. So we are going to say set selected category, and for the selected category, what we are essentially going to do is this: we are going to pass in the category, okay, the category string. Remember, each and every one of these, let me open this up. Every category actually has a category string right here, so that's essentially what we're going to pass in. So let's say, for example, let me go back. Okay, let's say for example right here the user chooses, okay, instead of beef, chicken or lamb or pasta or pork or seafood. Now that is going to automatically accept the, we're going to pass in that particular string, and then what we want to do is we want to filter through this particular array, and we are going to select whichever category that has been selected, and we're going to set it as the new selected category. All right, so what I'm essentially going to do is I'm going to just use a filter. Let's use a filter method. So I'm going to say const new category is going to be equal to, okay, state dot categories dot filter. Now that's going to actually take in the category, the callback function, so the category, and then I'm going to say, okay, category dot stl category, okay, dot to lowercase now is equal to str category dot to lowercase. Now essentially what this does is it's going to filter through these particular categories that we have, and wherever the category, the string category string we pass in is equal to the category string inside of this particular categories array, so that is what is going to assign as this new category. Now remember, whenever we actually use this filter method, it also returns an array. So it returns an array with this particular data inside of it. So essentially what we're going to do is we are going to say state dot selected category is going to be equal to new category, and then we're going to index 0. All right, so I hope that is clear, because this is going to actually return an array, and what we actually have right here inside of this selected category is supposed to be an object. So we are essentially accessing the first item that it returns, which hopefully, and we know it's going to be the only value. All right, so I'm going to save that. We have that set up, and then the next thing I actually want to do is, now right here inside of our home food of the day components, yeah, we can essentially get our state directly this way, but I also just want to show us a quick concept, which is the getters, making use of the getters. So I can essentially create a getter function and say get category details, and that's going to take in the state, and inside of here I can say return state dot categories. Okay, this also works fine. Okay, so this also works fine, and if I should save this, I can come right here and access it this way. I can say dot store dot getters, then dot, okay, the name of the getter function is this right here. So I'm going to say get category details. So let's see, and then I'm going to save it. So this should also work if we come back inside of our app. Okay, and we should still see our app work fine. All right, so that is fine. So we can either make use of the getters function in case you, especially when you need a kind of computed value. All right, so let's quickly move on and finish the remaining components. So the next component is home featured recipes. Okay, now whenever we connect to the API right here, okay, and we get this particular category, okay, we do all of this. Now the first thing I actually want to do is we are not just going to be loading from the seafood category, but from the default category we are going to be having here. Okay, so this selected category, so I'm just going to copy that and come right here. We're going to essentially do the same thing, import use store from VueX, and then we're going to initialize it, and we're going to say const, and we're going to say store equals to use store. All right, that should work. And whenever we do that right here, I'm just going to use the template string and remove the quotes we have right here. So I'm going to say store.state dot the selected category, and then the name of the selected category. So right here we can see we have inside of the data, we can see we have the str category here. So I'm just going to copy that and we're going to put it here. So this automatically means they selected the default category from the VueX store. The state is going to automatically fetch from that particular category. And the next thing we actually want to do is, instead of doing this, what we want to do is we want to actually commit a mutation. Let me close this up, and the mutation we want to commit is set featured recipes. So I'm just going to copy that and I'm going to say store.commit and the name of the mutation and then the data we actually want to pass in. So I'm just going to copy that and put it right here. Now another thing we need to actually do is, instead of we looping through the recipes.length, and let me just remove that. So the recipes.length, I'm just going to do something such as replace this with store.state. We're going to have featured recipes. Okay, so let's replace that, and okay, that should work fine. So let's save that and let's check our app. Let's see if that works. Oh, it seems we are having an error already. Okay, response.data.mails is null, and that's because also in the API response we are actually trying to connect to, there is an error here. So what I'm essentially going to do is remove this seafood here and let's refresh. Okay, so we can see right here in the featured recipe, okay, we can see it fetch this from the API, which is the starter. All right, that actually works. Okay, but the recipe of the moment is not loading. So let's see. Okay, right here in the getters function that we actually created, this is wrong. This is returning the state.categories, and we actually need the recipe of the day. So since we didn't create a getter function for this, so I'm just going to copy this and revert to what we had initially, so which is store.state.recipe of the day. So let's save that and let's go back to our app, and everything should work fine now. Okay, so we can see now the recipe of the moment, we have this honey balsamic chicken, and right here the featured recipes, we have this capsalon and all of these. Now if the component should get unmounted and we'll come to the home and get mounted back, and even though the data should have been lost, but because we are connected to the VX store, we can see this also it loads the same data and it doesn't need to actually connect to the API. It automatically have that data installed. Alright, so this actually works fine, and the recipes, whenever we come here, okay, this works. So when we click on maybe any recipe detail, okay, the featured recipes right here, so if we click on any recipe details, and we should see it still have the same data without connecting to the API again, and we can see we are not unnecessarily connecting to the API again. So everything, all the data are basically stored. So let's do one more thing. Okay, on inside of the recipe page, number one, we want that, okay, the default state should actually be the one showing right here, and also whenever we actually change this, okay, so the default selected category should also change. So let's quickly do that and we should be done with this particular lesson. Okay, so I'm coming here into the recipes list. Okay, I'm going to close this up, and let's close this also. All right, so we are seeing the recipes list right here, okay, which is loading the default that we had also in the home featured recipe. All right, so essentially what I want to do is, the first thing I'm going to import use store from VueX. Okay, and after that, okay, and I'm going to initialize the store by saying store equals to use store. All right, so we have this right here, and the next thing we actually want to do is, now we actually want to make use of this current recipes list right here. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this and I'm going to say if store.state.current recipes list dot length, okay, equals to 0. We can do that, or I can just essentially do this. So this automatically equates to the same thing. That is when we actually want you to get featured recipes, and this is not recipes but get recipes list. So I'm going to rename this function also get recipes list. Okay, so only if there isn't any data inside of the store, inside of the state currently, that is when this should actually happen. So essentially what I'm going to also do is, okay, instead of having the seafood right here, so I'm going to use template strings. Okay, and let's replace this also. So this is going to be store.state, and then it's going to be dot, okay, the selected category, selected.str category. Okay, so that should work fine. And when this it actually fetches this from the API, we don't need to actually splice it. We want all of the data, and we are not saving it inside of these recipes. What we want to do is store dot commit, and what do we exactly do we want to commit? Okay, we want it to commit set current recipes list, and this should run, and then what we're going to do is we're going to pass in the data it gets back. So let's copy this and let's paste this and save. Now another thing, don't forget, we actually have to do two things. The first is, instead of looping through the recipe right here, so I'm going to remove the recipes, so we don't have a variable named recipes anymore. So I'm just going to replace that with the state. Okay, so I'm going to say recipe, so this is going to be store.state, and instead of featured recipes, this is going to be current recipes list. Okay, and let's save that, let's replace that rather, and okay, let's see current recipes list. And another thing, instead of having this default data right here, so this is also going to be the state dot, oh rather store dot state dot default recipe dot category. So I'm just going to copy this right here, copy this right here, and then just paste this here. Okay, so let's save that, and then the name also, okay, the name is should also be this right here. So whenever we're going to the routes, now the category detail page. All right, so let's save that and let's see what we actually have. All right, we can see it loads from that particular category, and the category we have currently is lamb. So whenever we refresh our application, so that's automatically going to choose from random, and we can say right here, okay, loading from starter. All right, so this works totally fine. All right, so the next thing I actually want to do is, instead of having this dummy data right here, so I'm going to use the v4 directive. So I'm going to say v4, instead of having items here. So what I want to do is access this particular state here. So I'm going to say in state dot, or rather store dot state dot categories. All right, so I can automatically just remove all these we have right here, and this here, instead of this being beef, so this is going to be item dot str category. So let's save that, and we should see this work. So we can still see this working fine and nice. All right, good. All right, now if we should check right here, whenever we change this, we also want the data we have right here to actually change with that. So yeah, the things we are going to do, the first thing is I'm going to create a new variable. Okay, so I'm going to copy this right here, and I'm going to say something such as const, and the temp category, okay, is going to be equal to this right here. So right here I'm going to just come and replace all of this with temp category, and wherever we have this, okay, so I want to replace it with temp category. Okay, so replace this with temp category, temp category. All right, so that is the first thing we want to do. Now, the second thing we actually want to do is to make use of the V model. So what I'm going to do is the V model is going to be equal to temp category. Okay, and the next thing is whenever this value actually changes, what we want to do is we want to set up a kind of watch, okay, to know that okay, this value here has actually changed. Okay, so I'm going to make use of watch. So I'm going to import watch from Vue, and down here what I'm going to do is we're going to set up a watch, and the way that goes, remember, we're going to take in the variable, the data we actually want to watch, and second is going to be the callback function that is going to run whenever this variable gets changed or updated. So for that, I just want to do something simple, which is going to be a console.log, and I'm going to say changed, and afterwards it's going to be temp category. Okay, now this wouldn't work, and the reason for that is, let's just quickly save that and let's run that and let's see. Now we should get a kind of warning right here because it's going to say invalid watch source. Now a watch source can only be a getter or effect function or ref or a reactive object or an array of this type. So essentially what Vue is telling us is for it to be able to watch, for us to be able to watch this particular variable, this particular piece of data, it has to actually be a reactive data, okay, a reactive value. And right here we can see that all of our variables that we create are not automatically made reactive, so we can just wrap this inside of a ref like so. And now to make sure that everything works well, remember whenever we're accessing inside of our script right here, we have to use, and we are making use of the ref, we have to access the value by using dot value. Okay, so I'm just going to say dot value, and right here also I want to console.log dot value. So let's save that, and okay, we should see the error not showing again. All right, so how about we try and change it? Okay, we can see changed beef. Okay, but the rest is not working. Let's quickly check. There must be something wrong. Okay. Oh, yes, I've seen the issue, the mistake I made. All right, right here we have to actually bind. So we actually have to bind this value right here. Okay. So I'm going to change this to item.str category. Okay. So now the value is now dynamic and not static. So our select element should work now. So let's see beef, and let's change it to chicken, and we can see change chicken. Okay, how about we change it to lamb? Okay, we can see it's getting updated now. This works nice. Okay, so what essentially what we want to do is whenever we actually change the data, okay, so we want this function should also run. Okay, so let's just copy that, and what we are just going to do is we are going to call it right here. Okay, let's, okay, so now let's save that and let's see. So now automatically whenever I actually just change it to beef, we can see it loads from the beef category, and we can see now this is really dynamic. It fetched from the API miscellaneous. Okay, how about chicken? Okay, we can see that works. Okay, quick adjustment I think I want to make is, firstly, whenever we make a call to the API, I don't want it to be showing here, so I'm just going to bring my loader. So let's just bring our loader, and I'm just going to cut it. Okay, I think I want to place it somewhere here. So let's save, and okay, let's pick something else. Okay, now this works fine. Okay, pork. Okay, now this loads fine. Now I'm just going to style this up a bit actually. So let me quickly do that. So essentially I'm just going to come and let's just add a bit of padding, and okay, let's see if this works. Okay, now that is looking a bit much better. All right, so our app essentially works, and from featured recipe even until like the um recipe detail page, okay, we can see everything working perfectly right now. Okay, okay, let me just refresh that. Okay, we're having a bit of an error right here, so let's quickly check if there is any other bug, any other error we need to fix. Okay, before we go there, okay, we can see this page loads perfectly fine. And all right, how about the recipe category page? Okay, so let's see right here. Okay, we're having a bit of an issue right here. All right, so let's quickly fix that, and then we should be done with the fetching of our API data. Okay, so the first thing is let's go to our recipe category info components, and we can see we are fetching from the API right here. The first thing I want to do is I actually don't want to fetch from the API again, since we already have the data right here. Remember this particular data that was added. Okay, so we can just filter the specific category we need from here instead of making an extra connection to the API, which would help our app actually. So let's come back into the recipe category info, and the first thing is I'm going to clear all of this we have right here. Okay, and first thing I want to do is I want to just log to the console. Okay, first we haven't created our store, so I'm going to come right here, import use store, okay, from VueX, and let's initialize. Okay, so we're going to say store equals to use store, and what I just want to log to the console is okay, store dot state dot. Okay, let's look at the list of the data we actually have. Okay, so that should be the categories. Okay, so let's check that and let's see what we have. Okay, so we can see we have all our categories right here. Now, one thing we can do is we can try and pass in the particular route we are on. We should create a getter function. Remember I told you about getters right here. So that is going to take in the specific route which we get from our router right here. So it's going to take in the route and going to return a kind of computed property for us. So that actually will make things easier. So let's quickly do that. Okay, so right here, I'm going to say, okay, we don't really, okay, do we need this? Let's leave that. So I'm going to say get current category detail or get current category. All right, so this is going to automatically take in the state. That's going to be the first parameter. And then the second parameter is the category name. Okay, and we have a function, and that we essentially, so let me just create a variable and say current category is going to be equal to, now we're going to have state dot categories dot filter. All right, and then this is going to take in the category, and right here is going to say category dot str category dot to lowercase, okay, is equal to the category name that we pass in dot to lowercase. Okay, so this is just basically filtering this out, and we can just return this value. We can do something such as return and we can say current category. Now this works, or we can just return directly. So I can just do something such as return. Okay, this also works. So this works, whichever syntax or whichever way you want to go about it works fine. So I'm just going to save that, and coming back here, what I essentially want to do is, okay, now right here, instead of having this value being null, so I'm just going to say store dot getters dot, okay, now the name of this particular getter function, so this is get current category, and I'm just going to paste this here, and right here the only parameter I need to pass in is going to be the route dot params, okay, and that should be dot name. Okay, now to be sure that this actually returns the object, so what I'm essentially going to do is I'm going to look for the first item, so that's going to be 0, and let's save these, and I'm just going to do something, which is we're going to log this to the console. Okay, and then remember dot value, since this is a reactive. Okay, so let's save that, and let's come right here. Now, did that work? All right, I'm just going to refresh this once again. Okay, let's see the source of the error. Okay, that is coming from our getter function. Okay, so what I'm just going to do is I'm going to come here. Let's remove converting to lowercase. I think this should be able to solve the problem. And let's see. So I think I'm just going to refresh the app, and we shouldn't see the error again. Oh, still shows. Okay, so we are getting an error in our getter function. Anyway, I think a better way to actually handle this would be to make use of computed properties right here. So that's essentially what I'm going to do now. So let's say instead of we having this, what we're essentially going to have is computed. Okay, and one thing is computed properties help that we create help with reactivity. Okay, so let's do this. So instead of we having, okay, this particular function that we created here, so I can just do something, copy everything we have right here, or rather everything we have right here. So I'm just going to copy that, and I'm just going to paste that in here. Okay, so I'm going to remove the return that we have here. So this is going to be store dot state, and instead of having the cat name, this is going to be the router route dot params dot name. Okay, and this should work fine. Okay, so let's save this, and this should work fine. And coming back here, okay, let's refresh our app. Okay, so we can see this actually works fine right now. All right, so I can just clear this off. We can clear every of the other variables we've created, so automatically we don't need to even use this loader. So let's quickly come right here and remove these, and we can also do the same here. So clear all unused variables. And quickly, we commented this aspect out. I would love to add that back, but let's quickly take a preview at what we have. So console.log category info, and let's save that, and let's see what we have right here. Okay, we can see this object we have right here. This is our computed property right here, and then we can see we have this value right here. Okay, so I'm just going to say dot value. So automatically whenever we use the computed property, right here, when especially in conjunction with our store, it makes it automatically reactive, and that's what I meant by it helps with reactivity. Okay, so that means this particular data can actually change, and whenever we want to access, remember we have to use dot value. Okay, so let's come right here. Okay, we can see the ID, we have the category, and then we have the description. Okay, so I think we've rendered um every necessary information out here. So I'm just going to remove all the comments that we actually have. Oops. Okay, so let's save that. Now this works fine. Okay, how about the recipes page? Is everything working perfectly fine? All right, I think what is left is our recipe detail page before we make some minor changes, such as okay, rendering this when it loads and everything. I'm going to show you what we are going to do next. All right, so let's click on a recipe detail page, and up here we are having a bit of an issue. Okay, so let's see what the error actually is about, and then we can go ahead and fix the bug. Okay, so it says here the meal details.str tags. Okay, so this is basically what is causing the error in this particular component. So right here under the recipes detail info, I think. Okay, so let's search for that. Okay, so right here, this is where our issue is. How about we comment it out for a while for at first? So let's do that, and let's see if our app actually loads. Okay, so it loads totally fine. Okay, so now the issue is with the tags right here. Okay, so essentially what I'm going to do right now is first I want to actually log this to the console. So let's look at every value that we have right here, and I'm just going to come back. Okay, so right here we are looking for the meal details, and under that we are looking for the tags. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so we can see right here that in some of the values, in some of the recipes we get, the tags are actually null. So what we essentially want to do is we want to take that into factor so that we won't have error inside of our app. All right, so what we are going to do is this. I'm going to, let's just put this inside of the same component, and then we're going to use a if directive. So we're going to essentially do something such as if miss.stl tags, okay, is not equal to null. So only render this if this is not equal to null. So let's save that, and it shouldn't give us any issue anymore. So whenever there is the tags present on the recipe, it's going to actually load that. So let's check on this particular page. Okay, now everything works fine. All right, so we've essentially done everything that is needed except for a few little changes here and there. Okay, so I'm going to come back to the home page right here, and we can see we have two emojis here. They are not meant to appear side by side. Okay, so I'm going to come back to the home food of the day. Okay, right here, and I'm just going to come up here. All right, so I'm going to clear this. So I'm just going to paste this in, and this should be store. Okay, dot states and dot recipe of the day. Okay, and the recipe of the day. All right, so if this actually loads without any issue, then it's going to show this winking emoji, and if not, it's going to show this sad face emoji. So let's save that, and let's come here. So we should only see this. I think that's the first thing I actually want to do. Now what happens if there is actually an error? Remember I mentioned I think a while back that you should always make sure you undo your errors well. So the first thing I actually want to do is I'm going to create a new component here. Okay, so under src and then component, and then I think elements right here, I'm just going to create error loading dot view. Okay, and this component is basically going to be simple. Okay, so I'm essentially going to paste piece of code in from my repo. So whenever the recipe there's an issue connecting to the API, so we have this right here, and we're going to have this router.go. That basically means it's going to reload the page and okay, refresh. So for this to work, we have to import okay something from the view router, and what we're going to do is use router, okay, and then essentially we're going to say const router equals to use router, okay, and then right here don't forget we have to add the setup to make sure it works. So we have our components which is going to load whenever there is error. Now let's see how we actually render that. Now right here at the bottom right here, okay, so I'm just going to have my error okay loading component, and I'm just going to import it right from here, and this is going to be error okay, so error loading dot view, and this is only going to show up under the following condition. Okay, so if it is not loading, that is okay, the component is not currently loading, and okay, the store dot state dot recipe of the day is equal to null. All right, let's correct this, and only if these conditions are true, that is when we want to show this. So to actually demo that, I'm just going to change this to randoms. Okay, so let's save that and let's come right here, and remember it has already loaded and saved in the side of our store, so it won't reload. So I'm just going to make a quick refresh, and we should see a bit of an issue. Okay, so we can see recipe of the moment not found. Okay, oops, recipe not found, please reload page. So whenever we click on this, it's going to refresh and it should try to make the connection to the API. All right, so that actually works. So our error handling has certainly improved. Okay, so we are essentially going to do the same for some of the common components such as the featured recipes. So I'm just going to come right here and copy this. Okay, so when we get to maybe the featured recipe, so we can make use of this and in any component that fetches data from the API. So the recipes list, not the home featured recipe. Okay, so I can essentially just put this down right here. Okay, and what I want to do is import, make sure we import this. So we're going to have error loading, error loading. Okay, so and this is going to be okay, let's just close this. It's helped us with the importing already. Okay, so we have error loading already imported, and okay, we're having a bit of an error. Okay, so let's see, and whenever there is an issue it's going to automatically, so we can quickly demo that by doing something like, instead of okay, so let's just connect to the wrong endpoint, and by the time we refresh our app we should see something similar. Okay, we made a mistake right here, so this condition should be a bit different right here. Okay, so we are dealing with the recipes. Okay, so right here inside of the store, the particular data we're actually dealing with is the featured recipe. So I'm just going to copy that, and I'm going to come back to the unfeatured recipes right here. So the conditions we want to set is going to be a bit different. So if the store.state.featured recipe.length okay is equal to 0, we can either do that or I can just do this, and which automatically equates to the same thing. So let's save that and let's see. Okay, we can see this right here. Okay, Now another thing is, okay, these see more recipes also, we don't want it to show if, okay, and all right, so let's save that and let's see. Okay, now we can see this recipe not found, and so everything now works fine and looks better. Okay, so I'm just going to remove this and change it to the right endpoint. Okay, and this works. All right, so moving through our app now, we can see everything works how it's supposed to, and we are not unnecessarily connecting to the API, which actually even makes the experience smoother. Okay, one last little thing, even though it isn't about VueX, is remember this particular guy right here, this loading um input right here. Okay, so how about we actually fix that and make sure that we can actually type and search for something, and it makes use of this endpoint. Okay, so this search endpoint, search meant by name endpoint right here. Okay, so how about we actually do that now? Okay, so I'm going to come right here, and the first thing I want to do is, let me close these guys right here. Okay, let's close them up. Okay, to make this easier, I think I'm just going to come here, open editors, and phew, close everything. All right, so I think right here inside of our headers, yeah, we have it here inside of our main header right here. Okay, and essentially, okay, this is what we have right here, and we have the search somewhere here. All right, so first I want to actually have my set up, okay, my script rather. Okay, so I'm just going to have my script, and we're going to, okay, no, we don't need this, and we're going to just say set up. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to import ref. Okay, so we're going to import ref from view. Okay, and next is I'm going to need Axios, so I'm going to import Axios. All right, all right, we are going to create three different variables. The first is for going to be for our search term. So I'm going to say search term is going to be equal to, we're going to make it reactive. So we're going to have an empty string right here. And then we're going to create loading, and that is going to be reactive also. And that's going to be false. Okay, false. And the next thing is we're going to create an array for search results, and that's going to be equals to ref and an empty array right here. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to use the v model, and that's going to be bind, we're going to bind this particular variable search term. And what I want to do essentially is console.log and then search term.value. All right, so let's save that and let's see what we have. So whenever we type anything right here, okay, so okay, how about we set up a watch for this? And what I'm going to do is, let's just basically bring in watch. All right, and what we want to do is do something such as a watch, and then we're going to say we are checking the search term and our callback function. Okay, and what we just want to do is console.log search term, and let's save that. Okay, so whenever this get updated, we should see this. Oh, we actually want to console.log search term dot value. Okay, we only need the value of the search term. Okay, so empty string, and then whenever we type anything, we should see it get updated. All right, so we can see this works. So now the value we get in our search term, we are actually going to use it to fetch data from the API. Now, to make this easier, I've actually kind of created a function for this, and I'm just going to paste this in right here, and let's just do a bit of refactoring, and this is going to be search term dot value. Okay, and for now I just want to log this to the console.log, and we want to have the response that we get. Okay, so let's save that and let's see if that is going to work. All right, so whenever we search for something such as, okay, chicken. Oh, rather, we aren't calling our function yet. Okay, sorry about that. So we're actually going to copy this, and I'm just going to put it right here. Okay, so now our function should be called whenever the value changes. And okay, let's do that now. Chicken. Okay, now we are getting some changes. Okay, so we are seeing here, okay, the can't access properties search term. All right, so let's see. Okay, let's come back to our code, and I think, okay, this is where we're having the issue. This, sorry about this. So this should be search term dot value dot length, and this should be loading dot value. Okay, and I think this should work now. So let's save and clear the console, come back right here. So I'm going to search for chicken. Oh, we are still having the same issue. All right, I think I know where the issue also is. So this is I'm still making use of the option API right here, and we're just going to change this to this dot value. This should work fine and well now. All right, crossing my fingers, and now let's search chicken. Okay, we're still having another issue. This is interesting. All right, we are having it's having an issue accessing the property loading. Okay, so let's come back right here. Oh, and this is the issue. All right, so let's change this to this loading dot value, and let's see. Okay, I think everything has been actually addressed now. All right, so clear this, and okay, we're going to search chicken. All right, we can see we are searching through the API, and we are getting back our response in real time right here. This is cool. This is nice. Okay, good. So essentially, instead of logging this to the console, we can just do something such as we only want to display the first 5 elements. So we're going to use the slice method on the array it returns. So we're going to say search return result dot value, and that's going to be equals to this. And now let's remove the console.log and do this. So now it automatically assigns whatever value it gets to this. All right, now the next thing I actually want to do is this. Whenever we're actually searching for anything right here, we want to kind of have um a small display right here. Okay, now to actually make things a bit faster, I've written the code for this, so I'm just going to paste this in right here, and it's nothing you actually haven't we've not covered. So let's me quickly explain the code that we have right here. Okay, so I essentially added this particular so let me save that and try and format this a bit better. All right, so I essentially made this right here. Okay, this is relative. That automatically means I can add an element with absolute, that is position absolute, and okay, we can have it. Now this element only gets rendered if it is loading, or if the search results has item in it. Okay, but then if it is loading, okay, it's only going to display this particular element right here, which shows that okay, this is loading. But if not, if it's not loading, it's all going to display this right here. All right, so let's test that out and let's see if that actually works. So if I should search for something such as chicken, okay, we can see it right here. Okay, so I'm going to say chicken. Okay, now that works. So let's say we're searching for something that is beef. All right, so we can see all of these right here, and this works fine. Okay, one quick thing we want to do is, let me quickly refresh this. And let's say, for example, we search for beef. Okay, and we click out here. We see this is not actually changing. And if let's say, okay, I click on this, okay, that is only when it changes. Okay, and our recipe is not loading. Okay, we're going to come back to that in a moment. And okay, how we actually going to fix this? So whenever we actually search and we click out, we want this to actually not show up again. So to do that, it's very simple. We are going to write a bit of vanilla JavaScript. Yeah, so what we're going to do is, the first thing is, from view we want to import something such as on mounted. Okay, and we want to import before mounted. Okay, okay, rather on before mount. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is, I actually want to create a particular function that is going to undo this particular thing we actually want to do, the particular event, and it's going to respond to that. So I've already created it, so I'm just going to paste it right here. I will explain this in a bit, though at this stage I'm sure this is nothing special. And right now what I'm going to do is, I'm going to call the on mounted and on before mount. Okay, so let's first on mounted, and this is basically going to kind of take a callback function, and that callback function is basically going to say document dot add event listener. Okay, and the event we want to add is going to be a click event, and the exact event that is going to be run, the function that is going to be run rather, is going to be the close modal. All right, that's the first thing. And then also we're going to run the on before mount, so to make sure that the event, if the component is going to be unmounted, okay, the event is going to also be removed. Yeah, so let's actually do that on before mount, and we're actually going to call it this way, and we're going to do something as document dot remove event listener, and then we're going to say click, and we're also going to add the close modal. All right, so essentially what we are doing is, okay, I don't need this console.log. What we are doing is targeting using these e.target.matches. Okay, and then we are saying, if, as long as whenever we click on this modal, or rather whenever we click on this particular anywhere in our app or on our page, and it's not this modal we are clicking on, we want you to actually do something. So essentially what we are doing is, we are resetting the value of the loading to false and reversing the search results to an empty array. Now remember, right here, this modal only actually shows up whenever we are actually if there is a loading data, if this loading is equals to true, or there is data in our search results array. Okay, that is when this modal shows up. So whenever we actually click, the event gets registered. So this close modal events, it basically says that, okay, as long as you are not clicking on the search result, okay, we want you to reset this particular values, and these same values are the ones that actually conditionally renders the search results. And I hope we got that. All right, so we're basically done with that. Now for this to actually work, we have to copy this particular css class name, and I'm just going to come up here and just right here paste this in here. All right, and let's save that, and that should work finely. All right, so whenever we say, okay, let's say for example, I search for shawarma, okay, and I click out, okay, we can see that works, okay, and we can see sushi. All right, so we're having a bit of an issue right here. Now, that's because the previous method I made use of is to make it kind of SEO responsive, and so that we have the name of the recipe right here, and then I can just get the name and get the ID from the router and all of that. So that you can decide to refactor your app this way. It also works the same way, but I'm going to go back to just the ID, and what I'm essentially going to do is right here I'm going to change what we have to just the item.id. So now let's save that and let's come back to our app. So if I should come here and let me search for beef, and right here, okay, we can see that the ID has been replaced with the link has been replaced with just the ID. So if I should click on this Zhejiang beef, and it should load fine. Oh, interesting. So we're having invalid right here. So let's refresh this and let's see. Okay, so we can see everything loads fine now. So if we should search for, let's see, Turkey. Okay, do we have any Turkey? Oh, I meant Turkey. Okay, so we have this Turkey meatloaf. Clicking on this now should bring me here, and we are still having the old, okay, details right here. Okay, how about we when we click on something else? Let's see this vegan chocolate, and okay, scroll back up here. We are still having the old data. We're going to fix this in coming lessons, but essentially I hope we are now familiar with making use of VueX and also adding custom events. Now, if there is any part of this lesson you actually didn't get, which is totally normal, trust me, believe me, it happens. Okay, you can feel free to actually go over and over again. Now, in the next lesson, we're going to be looking at something really interesting. Okay, and I'm going to see you in the next lesson.